You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop.
Alright, kicking things off with a personal favorite. It's messy, it's weird, and it sets the tone real fast. Story 1. Don't blink.
Janelle and I couldn't get enough of each other in the beginning. We were young and insatiable, attached at the hip in every way. When I finally proposed, she responded with a tearful yes, but soon she began asking her own question, one I was less eager to answer. She'd hold me with her smooth, sweaty legs as we lay exhausted in bed. Her pounding heart would beat against mine as she lay on top of me, and she would whisper, "Can we have a child now?" I was hesitant at the start, and would pick from a number of preloaded responses including, soon, or, of course, just not yet. I was young and wanted to focus on my career, and the permanent jump into parenthood with no experience was a terrifying thought. Still, I loved Jan more than I'd loved anyone else. When we finally married in a small familial ceremony upstate, I began to realize I wanted to raise a child too. Though young, it was true we weren't getting any younger. One night about a month after our wedding, Janelle squeezed me with her arms and asked, "Can I have a baby?" My heart teetered on a steep precipice as I gave sperm samples to my physician. I had a feeling Janelle would have kids with or without me based on how passionate she was about it. As selfish as it sounds, I exhaled with great relief when she told me the problem was within her anatomy, not mine. Janelle was infertile, anovulation due to POF, premature ovarian failure. She was devastated. I was on my lunch break uptown when I got a call from her in the hospital she worked at. She assured me everything was alright. She'd sliced the tip of her thumb off while chopping vegetables and needed stitches. I was going to rush over, but she assured me she was fine and to wait until after work. When I picked her up from the hospital, she rushed over and squeezed me tight, crying hot, wet tears into my chest as she apologized over and over for having been so cold to me. We held each other and cried, releasing the toxic buildup that we'd held in for so long. I teased her about her puffy bandaged thumb with dad jokes about hitchhiking and mentioned how she, with her perpetual thumbs up, appeared to be giving everything an approval of coolness. She groaned, but then truly laughed for the first time since her diagnosis. It felt like everything might actually be okay. I began to spend more time at work, focusing on getting the raise that my employer dangled before me like bait. I tagged along to the trade show in Miami one weekend, realizing part of me just wanted to get away from January. I kissed her goodbye that Friday morning, expecting to see her on Sunday evening, but plans changed. The second day of the trade show was cancelled due to a power issue, and I took a flight back Saturday instead. I was exhausted and only looked forward to a long shower, but concern grew when Janelle didn't answer my texts I'd sent from the airport. Worry became panic when I called repeatedly and got her inbox. I rushed home and unlocked the door, but sighed with relief upon entering. Jan's coat was on the chair and the shower was running. "Isn't he beautiful?" she asked, looking down at the meaty collage with loving eyes wet with tears of joy. I fell backward on the blood-spattered trail on the floor, struggling to get away from the ungodly scene, but not before seeing it. Before I called the ambulance with shaky hands, before I vomited on myself, before I crawled from the bloody bathroom, before I could turn away from the horror, I saw it. I saw that nightmarish sculpture of a baby slowly turn its bloated head towards me, and smile.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
I found a 4,600 years old document describing a humanoid species named Sigil, by polonium poisoning. I wasn't expecting a lot when I was invited to translate some newfound tablets. I mean, I was personally excited, but was sure the contents would be mundane enough. Ayman was a pleasant man around my age, the Turkish version of an English butler. He gave me space to work but politely reminded me of making at least 2 meals a day when I was too deep in my work. His presence helped so much with my productivity. The following is my translation of one of the tablets. They surprised us with their resistance. And they are so numerous, the sigil took a habit of procreating like the rats or ants, and now they are as numerous as the stars in the sky. They always had plenty of children, but most of them would die of disease or being attacked by the predators on their precarious houses. After invading and overpowering their fellow sigil from other tribes, a group reached our empires and slaughtered us. We hit them back, with our better horses, better weapons, better built men. And we slayed them, but despite that, they never stopped. They are indefatigable. Like their ancestors, even inferior hominids, their life is only worth after procreation, so their children dead before mating age are useless and forgettable. This primitiveness is what enrages me about them the most. Tired of seeing my sisters and daughters die, I'm utterly ashamed to admit that I was scared and reached out to the king. I advised him to strike a deal with the sigil. The king would stay with them on the surface to rule them and develop their society, and stay there with them for precisely 4.560 years before we fiercely take our world back. Of course they agreed. They don't even understand how much time that is, but it's not a lot for us. We never die, we are simple reborn on a new body on a new generation, every time wiser, stronger, purer. We are moving to our fortress deep inside the earth by the ending of the forthcoming Ara Adaru Arku month. We will make no mistake this time, we'll keep the sigil under constant surveillance and learn all their secrets.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
There is no such thing as Area 51, by Blue Key Card. For several years I've been an avid reader of No Sleep, but because of my profession, I was never permitted to submit content to it, or to anywhere. Occasionally an Area 51 story pops up. I used to work at Area 51, or I snuck into Area 51, etc. These stories always made me want so badly to finally jump in here, but I always held my tongue until now. There is no such thing as Area 51. Sorry. And the fact that it's the golden egg of conspiracy theories worldwide is exactly what the US government wants. I'm writing this in a bit of a rush and I don't have any of my thoughts organized, so I'm just going to break it down as follows. These are a few names for the place you know as Area 51. I don't know much about its history, but essentially it was intended by the US Air Force to be a secret weapons testing facility during the Cold War. It had a few on-site extensions. One of them was for developing experimental rocket and jet engines, one was for training contingents of troops for nuclear warfare and post-apocalyptic survival, etc. But much like the third Star Wars movie, the site and its purpose got out around the time of the Roswell incident, and a media frenzy popularized the base. The government tried at first to quell speculation about it, but then adopted another strategy, feed into the hype, and simply moved the base a few dozen miles away. But I didn't need to see a doctor to know that I am suffering from the same malignant tumor that killed my father, glioblastoma multiforme. Every 3 months we get a health evaluation, and every 6 months we get a CAT scan. I simply didn't report the very damning symptoms this past eval, and I'll probably be gone before they scan me next. I really wanted to do this instead. Maybe just to be the first, I guess. The only other thing I've ever done with my life is fix computers. The real secret military base is McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas. The history of the airport was always bound up in military involvement. Before and during World War II, the Army Corps of Engineers and the Air Force were building, storing, training, and doing all sorts of things there. Basically the government, and its corporate benefactors in the military-industrial complex, of course, acquired full ownership of the airport around the time Area 51/Groom Lake exploded in the public eye. It was a rush job, and a simple solution. For all intents and purposes, McCarran is an airport. It moves civilians in and out and all over the world just like any other airport on Earth, but its subterranean operations are really something else entirely. First of all, you have to understand the structure of this military base. Have you ever watched the mechanics ducking in and out of the planes outside, or seen your luggage loaded onto the plane as you board? Well, all of that cargo transport activity acts as a cover for the mass movement of special forces, lab equipment, military hardware, exotic building materials, etc. It's not hard to do. They drive one of those rigs by with all the luggage spilling out of it, and then you instinctively don't question what's on the other 4 rigs behind it. We even have mix-ups and spills occasionally, and nobody bats an eye. You're always exposed to some level of radiation while flying, and McCarran, by the way, is why the standard of safe exposure is set where it's at, but excess radiation from weapons testing is vented into the earth and out of the nearby desert. Having an airport to explain the radiation is an effective means of ridding the base of nosy folks with Geiger counters. But the true genius of this top-secret military installation is at the largest scale. The base was built under an airport because of the enormity of its power consumption. But it consumes a lot more power than a regular airport, so it was built in a city that consumes a tremendous amount of power, Las Vegas. So the base is hidden from view, even on the electric power grid. Area 51. Not so much. And that's on purpose. So if Area 51 is the distraction, what do we call the real one? It has many names, but it's usually referred to as the Nexus. That's an acronym, but not many people know what it means. Not even me. Everything about the Nexus, from its operations to its structure, is compartmentalized. That means everything is need to know, and virtually nobody knows anything more than their own specific task. You could work in an office in the Nexus doing something like accounting, and never have one single clue what the woman next to you does. Or the guy down the hall. They say not even the president knows exactly what's going on there, just a few generals and some dudes in the CIA. The base is underground. It's a network of large structures called hives, which form what is called the colony, or the Nexus. We make lots of Resident Evil jokes, by the way. Except unlike in that movie, the government doesn't try to make its employees feel comfortable with fake forests and windows overlooking digital cityscapes. It is a dark, dreary, Soviet-style labyrinth of halls and bunkers, replete with all sorts of submarine-like features, water and airtight hatches, trap doors, reinforced blast doors, etc. The only exception are the office buildings inside where chairmoisteners like me work. They look just like the office you work in. Except the men with guns standing guard 24/7 everywhere, looking over your shoulder. Oh, and the beautiful, almost surreal glow of the cutting-edge laboratories that pock the lower levels of each building. I've never been in them, but I've passed by a few times. Hive 1, Finance, Accounting, Operations/Organization Divisions, Troop Training/Housing, and some small-scale weapons testing. Hive 4, Total Informational Blackout. There are encryptions and firewalls and network security features protecting this hive that I've never seen before, not even on top-secret Navy projects I worked in the past. I'm being very non-specific in the language I use to describe our server clusters and networks because I don't want to tell them exactly who I am. They'll eventually find out anyway. But there's a widely whispered rumor about Hive 4, allegedly, the most terrifying thing in the world is in that structure on floor 15. Another thing I've read minimally about are the twins. I don't know who or what these are, but they're the above top secret gem of Hive 4. It is treasonous to even correspond about them on our secure networks unless you are cleared to do so, and only 4 employees are. I've only seen a few things about them. One was a medical record. No vitals, unusual vocalizations that manifest hallucinations and psychosis in nearby employees, and skin that produces violent nausea when touched. The document was basically speculation that the skin functions much like the Australian stinging tree or a jellyfish. I read documents about people who worked with them as well. In 4, a woman was remanded to the psychological ward after being in the same room with them, and a soldier who stood outside of the laboratory where they are kept basically killed himself. Specifically, he peeked inside during a routine access, then began bashing his own brains out with the butt of a pistol while singing an Irish folk song. The woman who was remanded to psych was even weirder. During breakfast with her colleagues, she grabbed a fork, stood up, walked out of the mess hall, stripped all of her clothes off, blinded herself in both eyes, then somehow managed to make her way all the way up to floor 1 where the access corridor to Hive 3 is located. How she managed to operate the dozens of keycard readers, passcode boxes, and retinal scanners is still under review. Last email regarding her was sent in 2012, about how she sits in the dark of solitary on floor 11 psych ward with a permanent and blissful grin on her face. This is all I have for now. But hopefully the world knows the truth someday about what goes on down here. We are all basically prisoners. We have very limited and supervised access to the internet, so if you don't hear from me again, assume they figured me out.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I'm a magician, and I'm pretty sure the kid on stage actually sawed a lady in half, by Magpie Quill. The sparkling black and purple circus tent was packed with people. I admit that I can be a bit skittish sometimes, and the macabre costumes of the undead clowns that would roam the aisles startled me an embarrassing number of times, but the show was a spectacle well worth the scares. The acts were at once chilling and captivating. I found myself holding my breath as the vampiric knife thrower stabbed silver blades dangerously close to her prey, and gasped with the rest of the audience when the ghoulish acrobats clung precariously to each other in their aerial act. As for his tricks, they were nothing short of breathtaking. With a wave of his hand, he turned the flowing purple drapes around the aerial silk dancer into fluttering rose petals and effortlessly caught the dancer in his arms. He called a volunteer to the stage, whispered something in his ear, and made him dance like a puppet on its strings. At one point he simply walked on stage and snapped his fingers, instantly engulfing himself in deep violet flames that rose high into the air before slowly sputtering out as he took a small bow, completely unscathed. I only began to suspect something was strange when the young magician began to perform a classic stage trick. A slender lady accompanied him on stage and lowered herself into a long wooden crate. The crate was also commonly wide enough to fold the body into, but this one was a tight fit. The feet sticking out of one side of the crate wouldn't usually move, but these bobbed as the lady adjusted herself. I gripped the edges of my seat and told myself it was just an act as the magician hacked into the crate. The screams grew louder and more frantic, and the crate rattled as the lady twisted in what appeared to be pain, her feet twitching spastically. Thick red blood began to pool underneath the crate. The magician didn't so much as blink. His blade and now his hand were stained, and blood dripped from the table as he relentlessly drew the saw back and forth, back and forth. The audience was silent and the lady just kept screaming, until there was an audible crunch and she went completely still. That was a lot of fake blood. I wondered if they had concealed a jug of it somewhere. They must have gotten assistance from some big-shot Hollywood artists to get the black bits and chunks in there. The magician put down his saw and turned the severed halves of the crate towards us to see. The audience gasped and murmured at the very realistic-looking torso halves. I peered into the crate itself. Other than the grotesque severed body, it seemed to be empty and plain. The lady's eyes snapped open. The audience cheered wildly as the magician opened the crate, helped her to her feet, tidied her now blood-soaked dress, and led her off stage. Of all the people who could come up to me, I was intercepted by a demonic clown on my way out. He smiled wide with slit lips and jagged teeth, gesturing for me to follow. "I don't really need more pictures," I said. He kept gesturing. I let out a small sigh and followed him through the crowd to one of the side exits. We stepped out into the night and he began to lead me around the back of the circus tent. "You want me to go inside?" He nodded. Sitting in the tent at a table with two slender wineglasses, surrounded by glittering yellow fairy lights strung along the walls, was the young magician. "Mr. Herring," he said. "A pleasure to finally meet you. You know me?" "Certainly not long enough to forget. Please, come in. I've always wanted to speak to you." Somewhat awkwardly, I took my seat at the table across from the young magician. The clown walked in carrying a tall bottle. "I do hope you like champagne." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you old enough to?" No, it's really fine." As I sipped the rose-colored champagne, I couldn't help but study the young magician's face. Some of his stage makeup was still on, making his angled jawline and high cheekbones stand out. He wore unsettlingly vivid purple contacts that were covered only by the tips of his long thick eyelashes. "The Mirage," I echoed. "That's in the name of the show, isn't it? The Mirage Carnival." Alexander smiled. "Yes. This is my show." "That's very impressive. Leading an entire circus troupe. Without me?" The way his tongue formed the sound sent a quiet chill down my spine. In his voice, my own name became mysterious and dangerous. Quiet. More footsteps scrambled to meet the disturbance. There were shouts of alarm and a loud, resounding crack. A spray of gunfire tore through the grounds. "Run," Alexander said. "Don't let them see you." Before I could process what he said, he grabbed me by the wrist, turned to the back wall of the tent, and swept his other hand through the air. The black fabric wall rippled and peeled open like a flower blooming. I said quiet, he snapped in a hushed tone. "And call me Alex." Voices shouted behind us, the heavy thudding of boots in pursuit. Another round of gunfire tore through the air. I almost dropped to my knees and scrambled for cover, but Alex kept me running. Then we broke the surface and sank deep into the cold murky water. It was dark. I couldn't see anything. I was somehow submerged from head to toe, tiny bubbles swirling around me like I had just dove into a pool. I stretched my legs downwards but couldn't feel the bottom. Alex squeezed my wrist. Alex swam upwards, pulling me along. We broke the surface and pulled ourselves onto a strangely smooth and supple floor. There was a click behind us. We turned to see the man in full body armor and a helmet with a reflective visor. He held a pistol pointed at Alex. Alex chuckled. "Ah, you've got me. I really didn't want to put Brian Herring in danger, but you just had to choose today to storm my town." The armored man's finger trembled on the trigger. He began to reach for the radio at his hip. I swallowed. "Alex. Now that you've seen Brian with me, I guess it's gotta be either you or him. Easy choice." Alex snapped his fingers. Deep violet flames sprang out of thin air and engulfed the man. I gasped and scrambled away as the man's armor caught fire like kindling. Wild gunshots rang out, but the bullets went wide as he twisted and screamed, the flames slowly consuming him. Alex stood still, watching. A thin smile tugged at his lips. His eyes flickered with the flames, barely concealing something deadly behind them. "Alex," I whispered. As the adrenaline sputtered, a million questions filled my head. The young magician let out a small, contented sigh. "Alex," I managed, this time loud enough to be heard. I was trembling. "You killed someone. They saw you with me, which put you in danger. I don't want you to live my life of being pursued. Not that you could survive long. But..." "One question," he said. "You're not human, are you?" "No," he said simply. I nodded. Alex stood on the tips of his toes and leaned in close to my ear. "See you again, soon. And number X200B.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name."
My Husband is Driving But Won't Stop Staring at Me, by Elegant. We finally had 2 weeks off at the same time, Richard and I. Let's go on a road trip. Somewhere random, somewhere we haven't been yet. What do you think? I wanted to leave enough mystery for this idea to be intriguing, and went out over the desire to spend our hard-earned vacation time at home doing spring cleaning. Well, Richard pursed his lips as he weighed his options. I was the spontaneous one, while he tended to opt for more responsible ways to spend time. I put on my best combination of alluring smile and pleading eyes. "Come on, please. I promise when we come back we can spend the entire rest of the time cleaning every nook and cranny of this place." 3 days later we had an Airbnb booked and the SUV packed. It had been so long since we had been able to take a trip like this together. I was determined to make the most of it. I spent the better part of the workday after the decision to go researching small seaside towns and activities. The drive was estimated to be just over 7 hours according to Google Maps. While we had a bunch of podcasts and games ready to go, I knew I was going to succumb to my desire to nap on long car rides. There is something about the sound of tires on the highway and the purr of the engine that soothes me. Just as expected, I fell asleep about 4 hours in. A blaring horn startled me awake, with a semi-trailer flying past my window to confirm the source. I rubbed my eyes. "Han. What do you dash?" I hadn't looked at Richard yet. When I glanced at him just then I noticed he was staring at me. Right at me. Just his head was turned 90 degrees, a smile frozen on his face. I screamed as a red Honda changed lanes right in front of us. Somehow, Richard smoothly changed lanes right around the car and back. I was looking right into his eyes that whole time. He hadn't turned away from me, not to look in the rear-view mirror, not out the front windshield, not even a little to the side. His eyes were locked onto mine, his smile never faltering. The weirdest thing was how his eyes looked. They were always my favorite feature of Richard's. Deep mossy green, with perfectly long eyelashes. But now, they seemed darker somehow. It took me a few moments to realize that it was his pupils. They were slowly dilating, swallowing more and more of his iris into darkness. That was an hour ago. No matter what I did he would not look back at the road. I tried to turn his head, scream, plead, cry. I even slapped him at one point hoping to break him out of whatever trance this was. The only time he moved was when I tried to grab the wheel from him. I won't try that again. Part 2.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
Eventually it came back to me, but I must have looked like a fool standing there in the aisle at Target, pursing my lips as I tried to find the right muscle movements. I don't recall the last time I tried to whistle, so perhaps it was lack of practice that led to my inability to remember how. Not like riding a bicycle, whistling. Then again, it's probably been longer since I've been on a bike, so I don't have much faith that skill will return as easily either. And after the hip replacement in 17, the nasty fall I took last summer down Jared's steps, I offered many times to help him fix those steps and he never took me up on it, not to mention the dizzy spells and fuzzy vision that just seem to come on with no warning as of late. I've no business getting on a bike. Helen watched me, her brow creased with a look of concern. A thought crossed my mind. Am I still standing there? Was that yesterday? Where am I? We're in the living room of our apartment, doing our own things but still together. The television is on, but no one is watching. Just background noise. There was a time when no one wanted background noise. Back then the quiet was peaceful. Now the quiet is too loud, filled with passing trucks, the shake of the train rumbling by, even the upstairs footsteps and random squabbles of neighbors. The background noise of life got to be too much to listen to, so we drowned it out with the ambience of a television sitcom laugh track. As you get older, worry piles on like interest from a loan shark. It doesn't take long before people are sitting you on a bench, asking if you know your name, what day it is, all that jazz. You have to work through the progression, nod along politely and not get angry about a small misunderstanding that morphed into something bigger than it is. An ordeal like that eventually leads to another hushed conversation around the dinner table when the kids visit, deciding if maybe now's the time to move me to a home. I'm getting too unruly, I need constant supervision, constant care. I get up to go into the kitchen and tell them off, but Helen takes my hand, tells me it'll be alright, nothing's going to happen. I remember now, the whistling incident wasn't yesterday. It couldn't have been. There's ice on the windows today. We had gone to Target for sparklers and snap pops for the grandkids for when we went to Jared's house for his 4th of July party. We used to have the party at our place, back when we had a house in the country. But the house was too much for us to manage, so we sold it and moved to the apartment we're in now. First floor walk up, no stairs. Probably why we hear so many noises too, being ground level right next to the street. Plus the upstairs neighbor is a hefty man, a good guy, don't get me wrong, but not light on his feet by any means. I tried to tell him he should try to work that weight off, it only gets more difficult as you get older. Daniel, I think his name is. Does something with computers. I don't think he took my suggestion well, even though I meant well by it. I see Helen furrowing her brow at me again. Did I do it again? Or am I still doing it? Is this Target? Where am I? I remember now. We never did get the sparklers, or the snap pops. It wasn't sprinklers, it was sparklers. We were getting sparklers and snap pops. For Jared's 4th of July party, which was yesterday. But it wasn't yesterday, because the window is frosted over with ice, and Helen is. Where is Helen? Wait, I think I did, when she wished me a Merry Christmas last month. I don't think she liked the suggestion, but I meant well. Are you okay, Mr. Sanders? She asked. I felt her hand on my arm. Reminded me of Helen's hand. Warm, soft, gentle. I was looking for Helen, I said after much deliberation. Her brow furrowed, much like Helen's did when she saw me trying to whistle. I must have been making the same face. She'll be back soon, Effie said as she got up from her seat and walked over to me. She walked with grace, even for her size. Not like Daniel. Maybe they wouldn't be a good match. Effie led me back into my room and helped me back into my bed. This place wasn't that bad. I remember not wanting to come here after I tripped and fell down Jared's busted step, the same one I offered to help him fix all those times. 45 years pouring concrete for a construction company, we could have fixed that step in a jiffy. But he said no. I told them all I'd be fine at the house. No, not the house, the apartment. We had a first-floor walk-up, no steps. I remember now, Helen fell down the steps too. Did I pull her down with me? There was so much blood. Was she okay? I got worried, I started shaking. Where is Helen? Where is my wife? I must have startled Effie, because she put her arm around my good hip and pulled me closer to her, steadying me and holding me up as I regained myself. I relaxed a bit. Of course, Helen was fine. Effie told me she'll be back soon. She wouldn't lie to me. Effie knows that Helen is my rock, I get lost without her. I told her so. Wait, did I just tell her? Was I talking just now? I felt a hand on my shoulder, turning to see Helen in the chair beside my bed. I leaned into it, feeling her warmth against the cold. I'll leave you two be, Mr. Sanders, Effie said. She turned the television on, some old sitcom on TV land, background noise to cover the sounds of hospital instruments buzzing and beeping.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
A man has been standing in the middle of our street for the past 4 days. We Can't Leave Our Homes, by Richard Saxon. I awoke to the faint sound of sobbing in the distance. At first my tired mind associated the sound with one of our kids, with my mind barely lingering on the edge of consciousness. But the longer I lay there, the more I started to realize just how off it sounded. The sobs were too dark, akin to those of a grown man, and they were coming from outside our home. It's not the kids, I whispered back, more annoyed than anything. Shut up, will ya? A man screamed from down the street, but he received no response. About half an hour had passed before I realized I hadn't moved an inch. I had been transfixed, and only broke free once my wife properly woke up to ask what I was doing. I don't know, just don't go outside, please, she begged. I grabbed her hand and gently pulled her away from the window. Something about the man had put us both into an undeniable state of panic, but apart from his unsettling look, there wasn't an explainable reason for the fear we felt. 911, what's your emergency? A woman asked on the other end. Sorry. My name is Zach Larson. There's a man standing in the middle of the street just crying loudly. I don't know if he's drunk or what, but he's scaring the kids. I can't really say it's an emergency, but something is definitely wrong with the man, I explained. Alright sir, we'll send a patrol car to check it out. Could you confirm your address please? She asked. After closing the blinds, the two of us headed back to bed, confident that the police would handle the situation. And I wish that would be the end of our story, I truly do, but as fate would have it, things would only get worse from there. What the hell is going on? I mumbled to myself. As before, the sight of the man put me into a sort of trance, one that was only broken once I heard a tiny voice coming from behind me. Why is the man crying? My son asked. Stephen was only 5, but I'd assumed his bedwetting days were a thing of the past considering the last accident had been over a year earlier. Before checking on him, I decided to give the police another call. But before I could dial the number, I noticed the day. It was Saturday, which meant we'd been asleep for almost 24 hours, skipping over Friday entirely. Alex, go back to your room. Daddy has to make a call, then I'll come check on you, alright? Their car is standing there, but they're just gone. Try the television, Joanna finally suggested. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure going outside is a fucking stupid idea, I blurted out, momentarily forgetting there were kids around. Sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. I'm going to fuck you up, he yelled. I pulled the window open, ready to yell at him to get back inside. No sooner had our neighbor reached the crying man, than the air fell to a deafening silence. A second passed, then the sobs were replaced by a maniacal laughter that increased in intensity for each passing moment. I quickly did as commanded to no avail. Despite our efforts, the laughter remained as incessant and loud as ever. Then as suddenly as it had begun, it just stopped. What was that? Alex cried as Joanna grabbed both him and Stephen in a tight hug. Shoo, it's okay, she said as comforting as she could, just stay away from the windows, alright? By the time I could stand up to assess the situation, our neighbor had long since vanished. All that was left in his absence was a trail of blood and guts that led up to the monster of a man, who'd promptly returned to sobbing relentlessly. The next hours were spent in absolute silence. All we could do was to wait for sunrise and pray for a hopeful escape. We kept the television on, should any news appear. Our kids, while worried, were too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. In a way, I envied them. They saw us as their ultimate guardians, able to protect them from any harm in the world. But based on what we just witnessed, I didn't believe that to be true. Once again we awoke around midnight the next night, meaning yet another day had come and gone. But that time we didn't have any phones or computers to tell us the date, as the batteries had long since died. All we had were a couple of wristwatches to tell the time. Still the sobs persisted. It had gotten ever so slightly louder since our neighbor got killed, but despite the obvious calls for distress, there wasn't a single hint of sadness portrayed in his broken cries. The more we listened, the less we believed the man to be human. Let's turn on the lights, that thing is creeping me the hell out, Joanna said. Why haven't they come to help us, she asked. I didn't have a good answer, nor could I muster up any believable words of comfort. I could only do my best to protect my family from the horrific threat looming over the neighborhood until I myself finally succumbed to it. Her words were so void of emotion, monotonous and cold. She stood up to leave, but I grabbed her before she could even approach the door. The shock seemed to briefly bring her back to reality. I know. I don't understand what I was even thinking. I wasn't myself, she cried. But her brief lucidity wouldn't last, because as I packed away the leftovers from the previous night, I heard the front door unlock. The kids had already fallen asleep, and I knew I was about to follow suit. Still I rushed over, only to see my wife getting ready to leave. I'm sorry, were the last words she spoke to me before she left the house. I'm documenting this as my last words before we depart this world. I've used an almost empty power bank to write this message. I don't really have any signal, but I'm hoping that it somehow gets through. People need to know what happened here. If you are reading this, please send help. I don't know how long I can keep resisting the cries.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
I live in a small, 1,100 square foot, ranch-style home. I've lived here for 7 years and never had a complaint, until just last year. You have a terrible memory, my wife would say, blaming me when something went missing. When you lose something it's just the ghost, but when I do I'm an idiot. I can feel it. She tried to convince me. I didn't have any clue how close to right she was. My wife was lying on the couch, reading a book while completely under a blanket, one of her many lovable quirks. I had been working on my laptop, preparing for a deadline that I had been underprepared for that upcoming week. "Sweetie." "Fine," I said, annoyed by the minor inconvenience but secretly glad to get away from my computer. "I love you too, goofball." I covered her face again with the blanket. The basement has always been a good 10 or more degrees cooler than the rest of our home, a fact that didn't help to ease my wife's fear of being alone in it. Along an internal section of wall, nearest the ceiling, was a now open and dark tunnel-like space that was comprised of earth and, in some spots, support structures of the house. How did this fall? I asked myself. "Hello?" I called, hoping my wife wouldn't hear. "Ryan." She called from upstairs, her voice muffled by the floorboards that separated us. She never used my name like that unless it was serious. "Sweetie, don't fuck with me, I coulda tripped up those damn stairs." There was nothing. I never knew her to be a prankster, nor was she sneaky in any sense of the word. I made for our bedroom, which is nearest the rear of the home. The lights were off and I hadn't had my phone on me. I walked inside and could only make out our messy bed illuminated by the light that barely crept in from the living room. "Christina." A man gripped my throat from behind me. I struggled as much as I could, the sheer surprise and terror coursing through my veins. He tightened his grip as I wrapped my fingers around my door frame. He had been directing our struggle into the hallway and I wasn't going easily. When I thought I was finally shaking his grip loose, a second person approached us and rammed my head into the wall. I lifted my head and watched as 3 figures made their way down the basement stairs behind me. The last one had her in his arms. She was bound like a trophy deer and unable to speak through the duct tape that was wrapped several times around her head. Fuck you," I managed. I tried to look into her eyes. They had hit her too hard and now she was barely conscious. "What is this?" I yelled through my pain. The men were unfazed and continued finishing up the process. I heard a muffled grumble coming from my side. I writhed over and saw her blinking back to consciousness. I needed it to end. Her suffering. I couldn't watch her in pain, choking and crying in a puddle of her own making. The flashbacks came as every story and movie predict. She was so beautiful the day we first met. Sarcastic but quick to apologize if she thought she offended you. She loved laughter and only lived to please the people around her. Selfless and gentle. One of them approached Christina with a small knife in hand. "Through pain, through suffering, we summon thee." His voice spoke, breaking their long silence. I couldn't watch as he hunched down over her, silent tears falling from her eyes. The naked man stood to his feet, covered in blood, and clenching the knife. He approached me slowly, turning me onto my back to face him. "No. Please," he said, visibly trembling. "I won't say here what happened next. I can't." But the next morning, after a lot of deliberation, the police and several ambulances escorted 3 corpses from the property. I still don't know much about the man under my house. He respects our space and we respect his. What we do know now is that he loves fried food. There's not much you can do to say thank you to someone who saved the life of your entire family, but I think that a bucket of fried chicken every night is a good start.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
I'm a hitman, but I'm not allowed to kill my next target, by Blair Daniels. Michael Zinski wasn't my usual type of client. He wasn't a spurned lover, looking for revenge. Or a murderer, looking to snuff out the witnesses to his crime. Or a husband, hungry for his wife's insurance policy. I winced. That's just my alias, Michael. You shouldn't, actually call me that in casual conversation. Then what should I call you? I blinked. Clearly, he had never done anything like this before. Do you have the cash? His eyes darted around the diner. Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a wad of $100 bills. He wasn't discreet, but, thankfully, the diner was nearly empty at this hour. It's twice your usual rate, he whispered, very loudly. I wanted to give you a big tip, so you'll do a good job. A tip? You're not ordering an ice cream cone, Michael. You're ordering a hit. But I took the cash, smiled, and buried it deep in my pocket. And I don't want you to kill him. Michael, you know I'm a hitman, right? Yes. But Nancy needs his income, she's been a housewife for the past 20 years. No work experience, no education past high school. There's no way she could support herself on her own. You could support her, with the cash you just gave me. But it's risky business. I mean, he'll know what I look like, and you'll go on Sunday morning. He'll be napping alone in the house, won't even see you come in. Michael looked down at the table, and then added, it's the only time he's ever alone in the house. The only time, he lets her leave. He nodded. Okay. I'm in. The house was a tiny little thing, shoved into the gap between a massive brownstone and a dilapidated food mart. It would be a challenge to do it without any witnesses. I snuck through the backyard, creatively using the various bushes and fencing to hide from onlookers. I then stepped into the open window, like Michael told me to. The knife was heavy in my hands. I walked into the next room. Fast asleep. I visited Nancy myself a few weeks later. I like to do that sometimes. Pose as a friendly neighbor, see how their lives have changed in the wake of my work. Yes, I know it increases my chances of getting caught. But, as I said, I like a challenge. And then he started shaking wildly, clawing at the raw, red mark across his throat. That, mysteriously, cut his vocal cords. I smiled at Harold. Would you like a cookie? I asked, holding out the tray. I baked them, myself.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
I've been wanting to get something off of my chest for a very long time. The only person who knows the whole story is my wife, and she didn't find out until we were already engaged. I didn't have anyone to talk to about this, because anyone who knows will think ill of me. It's been 15 years since these events took place, so I finally feel safe enough to talk about them anonymously. I had a really hard time in high school. Traumatic events in my childhood combining with hormonal changes didn't make me the most easygoing guy. I'd consider myself handsome now, but at the time I was 5 feet 4 inches, paler than fresh linen and bone thin. My hobbies were all indoors and solitary in nature, and I found it hard to make friends. I was the lone wolf that everyone warns you about. My junior year of high school, Mr. Artis got sick. They didn't tell us what he had, but he missed almost a month of classes. Not having anyone to talk to took a toll on me. I wasn't allowed in his office alone, so I lost my hiding place. Being around more often meant that I was an easier target. The assholes who tormented me day in and day out stepped up their game. Almost every day was torment. The bullying escalated from just taunting me to physically hurting me. I was punched square in the nose one day. Another time, they slammed my hands in my locker door and locked it shut. On top of everything going on at school, my mom and dad had been fighting for a while. The week of the event, my mom left. Neither of my parents understood me, but mom tried. Leaving me alone with my father is something that I still haven't forgiven her for, 15 years later. I counted the bullets in the gun 17 times, there were only 3. I didn't know where to find more ammo, so I knew that I would have to make every shot count. One bullet was for John Carter, the asshole who filled my locker with piss-filled balloons. The second bullet was for Mike Wallace, who catfished me for weeks pretending to be a girl in our class, and then stood me up when I asked her out. The final bullet was for myself. I didn't want to go to jail, and I sure as hell didn't want to keep living. On Friday morning I tucked the gun into the waistband of my jeans, wearing a big hoodie to cover the bulge. Everything felt different, entering the school, like I was dreaming. The school itself almost looked like a set on a TV show, all conversation blurring like background murmurs. I suppose, looking back, that I had detached myself emotionally from the situation. I was calm and collected as I walked the halls, looking for my victims. I was early and classes hadn't started yet, but I figured John Carter would be in the gym shooting hoops. I made my way down the corridor that led to the athletics wing with determination. "Harold." I heard a familiar voice and stopped. I turned to see Mr. Artis standing at his office door. "Come in, I need to speak with you." "Hey, it's good to see you," I awkwardly smiled back at him. "Listen, I'm kind of busy right now, can this wait?" I was a man on a mission, I didn't want to lose momentum. "No, it cannot, come in." His tone was kind, but the sternness was undeniable. He held open the door to his office and entered behind me. "Harold," Mr. Artis whispered, "what on earth is that for?" I tried to speak, but I couldn't. Words got caught in the back of my throat, my eyes welling up with tears, and I just broke. The weight of the world which I had been carrying finally broke my back, and all I could do was sob. Mr. Artis didn't say a word, just waited for me to compose myself. When I finally did, I told him about everything that had been going on. I had never cried in front of him before, and the emotion that flowed out of me was surprisingly relieving. "Are you going to have me arrested?" I asked. I couldn't stop apologizing, but Mr. Artis' eyes were kind as he told me that everything was going to be okay. He told me that he understood what I wanted to do, but that it was the wrong solution. Comforted by his presence and finally being able to get everything off my chest, I almost agreed with him. I gave Mr. Artis the gun, which he said that he would dispose of. I knew my dad would be livid that it went missing, but that was a problem for another day. I thanked Mr. Artis for everything and went to class. May I please have everyone's attention? Last night, at 8:06 p.m. our school lost a beloved member of our faculty. Mr. Gideon Artis found peace last night, after a lifetime struggling with a hereditary disorder. There will be a service on Tuesday, for anyone who would like to attend, and all counselors will be available all week for any student or faculty member who would like grievance assistance. We will now have 5 minutes of silence, for Mr. Artis. The biggest mystery of all, is that of the gun. I know I took it from my dad's drawer. I remember counting the bullets, over and over again. I remember the way it felt, heavy in my waistband, and I know that I handed it over to Mr. Artis. The next weekend my dad went to the shooting range, and I was ready for hell when he couldn't find it. Except that he did find it. It was right there in the drawer, still loaded with 3 bullets. I can't explain the events that took place, but I guess a part of me wonders if Mr. Artist just wanted to look out for me one more time.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
I posted a picture of my great-grandfather over to r/oldschoolcool a few days ago. I posted it on my main account, not this one. I regret posting it. It's turned my family's lives upside down, opened up possibilities I'd rather not even contemplate, and thrown into question everything I thought I knew. I was scanning some old family photos onto the computer for my mum. I've always been fascinated by my great-grandfather. My mum always has so many stories to tell me about him, and how he brightened her childhood. He was truly a remarkable character. Plus, he was a particularly handsome man. I've always loved that photograph of him, with his chiseled face and his dark eyes staring into the distance. He wasn't looking directly at the camera. It's the only photograph we have of him. My mum says he was caught off guard by that photograph, because he normally never liked having his photo taken. Before I posted the photo, I was pretty certain he'd be a surefire hit with the online crowd. And I was right. But at the same time, I was still surprised by the extent to which people agreed actually with me. The photograph shot up to thousands of upvotes very quickly. My great-grandfather was internet famous. I got the usual, "Oh my goodness, your great-grandpa was so handsome," and "Is your great-granddaddy single?" comments. The first few comments made me smile and feel oddly proud of my genealogical inheritance. After a while it started to get a bit creepy, as some people started to cross boundaries and take things too far. I started to feel guilty. Sure, there were some beautiful, respectful comments, discussion and questions, but as the popularity of the photograph steadily increased, so did its exposure to the world in general, and that was when the less than savory characters started coming out of the woodwork. I never knew my great-grandfather, but from everything that I've heard, he was such an upright, almost regal sort of man, well-bred, well-educated, respectable and dignified. A true gentleman, and he had been greatly loved and revered by my family. And now, it felt like an oxymoron, this clash of worlds, having my amazing, dignified great-grandfather on display for the ugly underbelly of the internet to ogle and make crude remarks. It felt like I was violating his memory, like I was literally whoring him out for my own personal gain. And what gain? A few arbitrary internet points. I was about to remove the post, when two things happened, in fairly quick succession. First, someone kindly offered to colorize the photo and asked for details about hair/eye color, etc. I asked my mum for details. She had been very close to her granddad, and she could remember everything very well. The most striking thing about him, that you couldn't see from the black and white photograph, was that he had two different colored eyes, one a deep green, and the other dark brown. In the black and white photo it just looked like there was a shadow over the darker eye. When the colorized version came, it was beautifully done. They got the shades exactly right. That made the whole online sharing experience slightly redeeming, I must say. I showed my mum, and it made her cry. I'd almost been afraid to show my mum, because she had loved her grandpa greatly, to the extent that she still didn't like to talk about the end of his days. All I know is that it had been an extremely traumatic time for her. She sometimes still tears up, if something happens to remind her about the end. Anyway, a few minutes after the colorized version was posted for everyone to see, someone responded. "Hey, cool. I can't wait to see the photograph of my ancestral twin, And then soon forgot all about it, basically. The next day, though, I got this message. Anyways, so, I didn't want to let you down after the build-up yesterday. Plus, the fact that he seemed so annoyed meant that he likely won't come back, and so this would be my last chance to get a photo. So I know this is really iffy, ethics-wise, or whatever, but I sneaked a photo anyway, He had to stop at the door. He held the door open for someone coming inside. So I was able to snap a quick pic, but he wasn't looking right at me, which is both why I was able to take the picture, but also why the picture isn't that great. Given the lengths this poor guy had gone to in order to attain this picture, I was quite amused, so I clicked the photo with neutral expectations. The man was visible in side view, but I had to admit he did bear a passing resemblance to the colorized version of my great-grandfather. Maybe he was a distant relative, somehow. It bears noting that the guy who sent the photo was practically on the other side of the world to me, and to my knowledge, I have no relatives in America, so this is really unlikely. I took over my laptop to her and showed her the photograph. She glanced at the screen, first absent-mindedly, but then she did a double take. She couldn't take her eyes off the screen. "My God," she said, putting her hand to her mouth. She leaned into the screen, peering at it. "Can you zoom in on his face?" I zoomed in as much as I could without making a pixelated blurry mess of the face. "My God, it looks just like him," she said, finally. "I mean, honestly. Just like him. I mean, even. How is this possible?" I asked, voicing the obvious question for both of us. "Could it be a hoax?" she said. "Could this man, who sent you the picture, could he be playing a trick on you? These internet people can be so clever with their Photoshop stuff, can't they? Could they have worked from your original photo?" I brought up the original photograph, the one where my actual great-grandfather was facing towards the camera more head-on. The scar near his ear wasn't visible due to the angle of his face. His hand wasn't in view at all, either. "This is impossible," she said. "It can't be possible." I said all of this to my mum, and she nodded along, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. It might have something to do with what happened at the end. She was staring at the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her hands were shaking, and she seemed frightened. So, of course, my natural curiosity was on fire when she just walked away like that. So close to telling me more, and clearly in some sort of turmoil. And she thought, whatever it was that happened at the end, might be related to this. This modern-day man walking around who looked like him. How on earth is that even possible, and what the hell was it that happened? I really wanted to go after her and just open up my flood of questions, but she seemed in that unreachable mood again, like she often did when she was reliving her traumatic memories. I could hear her crying and I didn't want to open any wounds. My mind was made up, then, to delete the post, and forget all about it. Here's what happened. After that guy posted the modern photo of my great-grandpa in the coffee shop, along with the colorized version from the other user, there had been a barrage of comments. Here is just a sample that I copy/pasted and saved at that time. There were many, many others, though, some that I didn't even manage to read. Edit. I've now quickly edited out their usernames, sorry if this messes up formatting. Dude, this is gonna sound pretty random, but that guy looks just like a mythical figure famous in my hometown. They say he's evil and has a flying beast at his behest, that he'll summon, if you cross him. The sounds of its helper creature's screams are enough to kill you. We have an old portrait of him in our town hall, it's basically part of our heritage. They say that many years ago he and the Screaming Falcon wiped out half the town population because they mistreated him. I'm going to post the portrait tomorrow. Same chimera eyes and everything. Freaky. Reply to the above. User 2. User 1, I'm not from South America, I'm from a tiny town in Eastern Europe. How scary that you guys have basically the same legend over there. I've never heard anyone else mention this legend other than here in my hometown. User 3. OMG, I know what you guys are talking about. We have a similar legend in India. In the village where my parents were from. I am so excited to hear others talking about this. My mother would tell me about something that happened to her aunt when she was little by the, rough translation, cruel, one-eyed demon, with his helper, the screaming devil. They called him one-eyed because they said he could only see through his dark eye, or he closed one eye to look at you through his good eye. I'm going to have to type out that story properly for you. I'm going to get my mum to tell it again. Seriously, me and my cousins loved and hated that story in equal measure. It was so scary and we'd never sleep afterwards. We'd freak each other out by screaming in the middle of the night and scare each other awake. My older cousin did that once and I peed the bed. I was so scared, TMI, I know. All the elders in our village would tell us about it when I visited back home. OMG, I am so thrilled that other countries have this same demon guy in their history too. It makes it so much scarier, like he really roamed the world. Wow, I can't wait to tell my cousins. This is, like, all my childhood excitement / fears rushing back. User 5. User 9, replying to the above, what if OP's Gramps really is this monster guy? Everyone swears it looks just like him, and it's his likeness that's triggered all this discussion. But here's the worst part. I felt really tired out reading all that stuff. I mean, obviously, I reasoned that they've just latched onto the fact that my great-grandpa just happened to have the same unusually colored eyes as the man in these legends. But with my mum's reaction earlier I was just feeling bad and overwhelmed I guess, so I just left the laptop and I went to sleep. There were hundreds of comments I still hadn't read, and I'd changed my mind and I didn't want to delete the discussion just then, because there were so many people involved and the whole thing was just buzzing and taking on a life of its own, and so I felt like I'd be rude just to cut it off abruptly when there were so many people so excited. Besides, it wasn't even about my great-grandpa anymore, it was just that his multicolored eyes had unearthed a legend that people had thus far just kept tucked away in their little corners of the world until then. At that point, I was even slightly proud that my photo had managed to bring to light a hidden, very interesting sounding, obscure legend that many cultures seem to have their version of. I felt I would enjoy the discussion more when I was better rested. I wanted to take another look at the updated discussion in the morning, so I left the laptop in the living room, with the page open. Big mistake. I woke up this morning and my mum was sitting by the laptop, reading it all. Her face was white as a sheet, honestly. Even on her worst days she's never been like that. Even on the days when she's had nightmares that reminded her of how her beloved grandpa died, even when she's been reliving the trauma, I've never seen her look like she did that morning. I was kicking myself for leaving the laptop open, so I snapped it shut, quickly, so she couldn't read more, kind of rude, but it was basically to protect her, and I just tried to laugh the whole thing off. She wasn't in a great place, mentally, anyway, because my stupid post had probably awakened further traumatic memories for her about his death and just. I really felt awful to have pushed her to this point. The discussion about the legend of the two-colored-eyed man was an offshoot and unrelated, she had no business reading about it in her anxious state. I know, Mum. It's weird how there's a legend about a creepy figure, with similar multicolored eyes. I laughed. I guess there must be something in our collective unconscious about people finding chimera eyes scary, or something. So they built a legend around that. She stared off into middle distance, her gaze still fixed on the place where I'd closed the laptop monitor. I tried to talk about other things, I rambled on, actually. And she just sat there, transfixed. In shock. She put the glass down. And got up. She walked into the bathroom and slammed the door shut. I could hear the sound of her retching. When she emerged, she was puffy-eyed and hoarse. "Okay, so, Mom, I think we need to go see the doctor this afternoon." "I heard the screams," she said, looking at me in eyes for the first time. "I heard the sound of the screams. When I was little. I saw she coughed and put a hand to her mouth, and I thought she was going to be sick again. But she wasn't. She swayed a little, but steadied herself. I had no idea about the scale of things. I had no idea he was. I mean, I guessed a little, but... oh God. I was always so afraid to face the fear I always had. I loved him so much. I never wanted to face it. Edit, I just went for a nap, and woke up to find a letter from my mother. She's written something for me and I think she's gone out for a walk. I think it contains more info, finally, about my great-grandpa. I'm going to read it through and we'll try and update. Edit 2, I'm sorry, it's been a really traumatic few days. I will update later on today, Saturday.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I get it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and... what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.